Good morning. Good morning. Happy Wednesday. Happy Wellness Wednesday. I'm so happy to be here today. I'm especially sassy today for a couple reasons. The minor reason is homage to my Golden Girls today. If you don't know already, I am a huge Golden Girls fan. I've seen every episode 8 billion times. And it's something that I put on at bedtime with a timer because I can hear and see, I can hear what's happening without my eyes having to be open. It's a comfort thing. There's a whole story about something I read about that for people with anxiety a few years ago. That's a conversation for another day. The second reason I'm feeling extra sassy today, besides just the fact that it's Wellness Wednesday, is that today I'm celebrating the pending arrival of my new niece, Liliana. I'm not really sure 100% how they're pronouncing it, but she is on her way today. And shout out to my brother and my sister-in-law, because it's going to be a momentous day for everybody in the family, which is kind of ironic because last week we talked about the things we don't celebrate, which are the little things. Usually not the birth of children and birthdays and anniversaries, but the little things that we don't celebrate, that are extremely important. So while we're celebrating the arrival of Liliana, I want to revisit last week's challenge. If you watched last week's video, the challenge was, instead of asking what's next, to ask what have I already accomplished that needs recognition. And also to consider celebrating someone else's victory too, because you might not know how much they need someone to notice. So if you didn't see that video, don't worry. I'm going to drop the link in the comments. It's also available on my YouTube channel. If you have just stumbled on my page, my name is Donna. I'm a mom, a nana, a girlfriend, soon to be an auntie again, a Golden Girls fan, and a wellness advocate. I am a grad student studying for my Master of Science in Clinical Mental Health Counseling, which means I am not a counselor yet. So everything I talk about here is based on what I'm learning and my own personal experiences. And the reason that I started Wellness Wednesday was because of that personal experience, because I have been in a lifelong journey with anxiety and depression, and I have learned a lot of things about myself along the way. And I have also found that peer wisdom, which is the underlying concept of support groups, is of a lot of support groups, not all support groups, but that peer wisdom is it's extremely valuable because we can learn from each other. Sometimes we learn what not to do, sometimes we learn what to do, but there's a lot of times that we learn about things that we would never have thought about or never had known if we didn't learn them from somebody else. And a great example is my VIP group is wrapping up a 10-day challenge today. And yesterday I asked for those who were participating in that challenge, what their biggest takeaway or biggest win was. And one particular comment was that, they loved that they got the opportunity to learn from someone else. And because of that, they picked up a new good habit, which was drinking 16 ounces of water in the morning before they had their first cup of coffee. And it meant that they were drinking less coffee and more water. And that they also learned that even though they're chained to their desk most of the day working, that they could still find ways to sneak in exercise. And that's the kind of peer wisdom I'm talking about, things we might not have known or might not have thought about if we didn't hear it from someone else. And we're going to touch on that a little bit today too. So if you've been following me for a while, we already talked about last week's video and last week's challenge. If you did last week's challenge, if you took time to celebrate something you've accomplished that was maybe in your mind smaller, not as big of a deal, not always worth celebrating, let me know how that went for you. And also, if you decided to compliment someone else's small, quiet victory, let me know how that turned out too. If you're willing, if you don't want to share publicly, you can send me a message. You don't have to put it in the comments. That's up to you. Now, before I get started, if you're here, let me know you're here. If you don't see this till afterwards, you can still ask questions and comments. Facebook keeps live videos up for 30 days, and then the video is uploaded to my YouTube channel, usually within an hour or two of when I go live. So this doesn't go away. There's always ways to watch. All right, so now that I've given a shout out to my brother and sister-in-law and my incoming niece And my golden girls, Thug Life, Blanche, Dorothy, Rose, Sophia, let's get on with today's topic. This week, in the last week or so, I have been struggling with something, and it seemed like a great thing to talk about on Wellness Wednesday. I decided that because I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one that's experiencing this. So we're going to go ahead and dig into why I have to know everything. I don't actually believe that I have to know everything, or I didn't think I did until this week. So let's just stay with me for a few minutes and let's talk about how I got here. I am in the term of my second residency. So I'm taking online school, and residency is a 4.5-day face-to-face intensive opportunity to practice counseling skills that we are learning. My second one, I'm on the slow path for my degree. So I took my first residency 2 years ago, whereas most of my colleagues will have taken their first residency either very recently or within the last year. And a lot of my colleagues are working in the field currently, where I'm working for NAMI Citrus, which is the National Alliance on Mental Illness, but I'm still mostly on the administrative side and the coordination side. And so I say that I'm working on the fringe of the field, but not actually working in the field yet. So keep all these things in mind. So how I got here is, first of all, just a little sidetrack. And again, if you're here, let me know you're here. Feel free to drop comments, questions, or something that resonates with you. Let's just, as always, keep it politics free. I feel like there are I believe, based on my experiences over the years, that there are 3 types of people that want to know things. There are the type of people that want to know something because they want to tell someone else that they know something, but not tell them what it is, kind of lord it over them, if you will, kind of I know something you don't know type thing. The second type of person, is the one that wants to know things so that they can tell someone else, kind of a gossip type idea. And the third type of person that wants to know things, wants to know them, just to fill in gaps of what they don't know. They don't necessarily feel the need to share it with anybody. They just want to know so that they know. And I am that third type of person. But I didn't really, and I've known this for a long time. Knowing things that I'm not supposed to know or that I didn't already know often gives me insight. In my mind, it gives me insight on how to, that background information helps me to know how to deal with people, how to respond to things. And I have found it very helpful. And I believe truly, and I've said this before in previous Wellness Wednesdays, that knowledge is power. And most of the time I have found that to be true. When I don't know something, I go find out what it is. If somebody says something to me or asks me a question and I don't know the answer, I have no problem most of the time saying, I don't know enough to weigh in on this. And that's usually where I land when it comes to politics, religion, those taboo topics, if you will. But I don't have a problem going and finding out what I don't know. Where I have a problem is when I'm not sure how to find out what I don't know. And then sometimes that gets a little bit, not knowing gets a little bit ugly for me, because that's the anxiety side rearing up. That's the, I don't know what's going to happen, therefore I can't control it. So let me flesh this out a little bit for you. We talked about the 3 types of people. You guys know what kind of person I am, what type of person I am that needs to know things and why. I am in residency prep. I am in online school, so these face-to-face situations, they don't happen often, and they're a little bit intimidating, especially for somebody that does or has experienced a lot of anxiety, or more specifically, social anxiety. So the first residency was the practice and application of basic counseling skills: how to listen, what to ask and what not to ask, how to ask questions, things like that. Most of those things came naturally to me. And for the most part, I didn't find myself terribly nervous. But what I learned is, as I get older, anxiety manifests in different ways for me, because I've got certain aspects of it kind of controlled, so it hits in other ways. Um, so this residency is a little different. This is a level up. This residency is more about applying a specific theory of operation, because by now it's assumed that we have chosen an underlying theory for our practice, which I've been struggling with a little bit. And there's reasons for that. And then applying that particular theory and its related techniques. So there's a lot more expected. So even though I know what residency is supposed to look like, I know what to expect because I've been to one. I know there's going to be fishbowl setting where we're doing mock counseling sessions with everybody else circled around looking at us. I know all that. So that part is not as scary. What became scary for me was when I realized that this was going to be a level up. So out of the comfort zone. I've already established a comfort zone. And I did learn a lot from track one. I learned different ways to ask questions and not to ask such specific questions. And I learned that I have really good instincts in a lot of ways, but that I still have a lot to learn, which is always important to recognize. But y'all, I had a panic moment when I started reviewing the preparation lists for residency. I had a panic moment. Because there were things that I didn't know. And so my brain started filling in the spaces. And when we don't have something specific or some specific knowledge to fill in those spaces with, we a lot of times fill those in with core beliefs. And I'm going to dig more into that in just a moment. But for me, those core beliefs are the stories I tell myself. That's where the imposter syndrome comes from. We've talked about that before. These inner beliefs that we have, that we carry around, the stories that we tell ourselves. I've done a couple of episodes on this, and I'll find those and drop those links in the comments. And they're also on my YouTube channel. But because I didn't know what to expect, I just knew it was going to be kind of a level up, and I didn't know what to expect. And because I'm not working in the field, my brain started to get into that anxiety spin. And because a lot of times when we don't have knowledge to fill in those blank spaces with, our brain retreats to what it knows. It makes assumptions, and it oftentimes fills in those blank spaces with core beliefs. So again, we've explored this. We've explored the idea of imposter syndrome and fear, and what happens when we don't know and we're trying to control what we don't know. I covered it in the Your Brain is a Liar episode and the Are You a Fraud episode. It's just I've never really seen it or experienced it from this angle before, so I thought it was worth talking about. So the turning point here is that I'm 52 years old. And as I get older, I'm becoming more and more visual. And so for me, I needed to see what the theory of my choice looked like in action. And those techniques looked like in action. But because I was so busy freaking out, and because my brain was starting to fill in spaces with, you don't know what this looks like, so you're not going to be able to do this. You aren't working in the field like your colleagues, so you are starting out behind. These are the things that started coming into my mind. What were you thinking? Maybe this isn't the right path for you. These are those core beliefs that I'm still working on, but they still rear their ugly head, and my anxiety starting to come up, and those perceptions and those assumptions filling in the blanks that my brain didn't have knowledge to fill in. So you can kind of see where this is going. I was starting to feel like less than because I'm not working in the field already like most of my colleagues. And I'm making assumptions that most of my colleagues are, even though some of the self-introductions at the beginning of the term tell me not all of them are. Some of them are changing careers just like I started out. So it was a struggle, and you see where this is going, those core beliefs, that anxiety brain spin, as much as I've worked on myself and as much as I've worked on these things, I did what I call reverting to training and went straight into the spin and the spiral. And at the core of that, what it turned into was, I'm not good enough. because as I dealt with each stray thought that was coming into my head, that's where it led, which actually is a technique that I was doing inadvertently from my chosen theory. So, once I got a look at some mock counseling sessions, which I'm not gonna lie, I use AI as appropriate, very, very carefully when I'm struggling with a thought. I use it sometimes to brainstorm if I've got some things going on in my head, for my VIP group, for school, and I'm not kind of sure how to separate that out. I will use it to brainstorm. I will use it to start filling in blanks, basically. And in this case, I did that, and AI said, hey, here's this page, this website for where this theory started, and I'll get there in a minute. Why don't you go look at some mock counseling videos to help you visualize what it looks like? And I was in that spiral. I would have never thought about that. So while there are a lot of ugly things about AI, there are some uses for it. In this case, it led me to where I probably would have ended up eventually, because eventually I would have Googled, this is what I need, and websites would have come up and YouTube videos would have come up, and I would have landed on this page. But how long would the spiral have been were it not for that little bit of help? So once I got a look at what a session or two using my chosen theory would look like, I started to calm down. And why do you think I started to calm down? I started to calm down because now my brain, the gaps in my knowledge were starting to be filled. Okay, this is what this looks like. You know what? You kind of already knew this. The panic started to subside, and my brain wasn't scrambling to fill those gaps anymore, because as I dug further, I was filling those gaps with facts, not fiction. Facts, not assumptions. So it's not the first time I've been here, since starting school either. It really, a lot of times I get into spirals when I get intimidated by what I think something is going to look like. When I look at a syllabus for a class, and I'm like, holy crap, this is a lot, because I'm looking at the whole 10 weeks instead of one day at a time. So my brain will start filling in the blanks, and if it doesn't have good information, what does it do? It reverts to training. And that training oftentimes is based on my own perceptions, my own experiences, my own assumptions, and boils down to my core beliefs, that still need a little bit of work, obviously. And this isn't just me, and it's not just counseling. This happens. Think about the first time you started a new job or became a parent, like my brother and sister-in-law are about to be, or, as a girlfriend, or maybe as a wife or a husband or a boyfriend. I've had a lot of these core beliefs that have stirred in here, all the time. When I first became a parent, when I first tried something new, we can keep going with this. You can fill in the blank, if you will, with lots of situations where when your brain doesn't have the information, it fills in the blanks with whatever your automatic thought processes are. And here's the thing. Our brains just don't like blank spaces. They are selective. They have to be selective with what they take in, because there's only so much space up here. So according to an article by a professor of cognitive science, our brain automatically fills in those gaps, kind of performs a triage, if you will, and fills in those gaps with previously experienced patterns, perceptions and assumptions based on those previous experiences or existing knowledge. In my case, the default setting, which is still not good enough. And it creates its own reality. The problem is that a lot of times those assumptions and those experience-based thoughts are not necessarily facts. And again, this isn't anything we don't already know. We've just never necessarily applied it from this angle. We've heard stories about memory gaps and how our brain fills them. And that's why recollections of, sorry, y'all, morning stuff. That's why, eyewitness recollections, often 5 people can witness the same event and they don't remember it the same. And it's because their brain has triaged that information with their own experiences and perceptions. So each recount looks a little different. Sometimes a lot different because, and again, we've talked about this before too, because depending on our own experiences, we may be focused on different things. One person may be focused on what the person was wearing. The other person somebody else might have been focused on the weapon that was used. Somebody else might be super empathetic and have been focused on, if let's say it was a store robbery, on the store clerk and how scared they looked and all of those things. So again, this also can happen, and we've heard about this type of thing before. Besides our brain filling in fragments of memory, there's a phantom limb syndrome, I think is what it's called, where people who have lost a limb sometimes still feel like it's there, and that's another example of the brain trying to fill in the gaps. But this also happens in our day-to-day operation when our brain tries to fill in the gaps of what we don't already know, especially when we're facing something that is unknown. And again, because of that, it's also sometimes a control issue. What we don't know is scary. It's intimidating. And that's usually what happens for me. And while I've learned, and I'm continuing to learn, and I've talked about this too recently, that I'm being called to learn how to let go of control and to surrender control, and pay very attention and be very aware of the things I'm trying to control that I can't. This is often a control issue, because if we haven't experienced it before, if we don't know, then it's scary, and our brain tries to protect us from scary by telling us we can't do it. We shouldn't go there. We're not good enough. We don't know enough. And that's what's been going on with me for the last week to week and a half. So again, it's not just me and it's not just counseling. Think about whenever you've started a new job. Assumptions you may have made before you even walked in the door that turned out to not be true at all. When you first became a parent, when you first moved somewhere new, started a new hobby or a new exercise program, a new business, learned some new technology. There are all kinds of ways that we stop ourselves or we delay ourselves because we make these assumptions and fill in these blanks in our head because we don't know what the outcome will be, or we don't know what it's going to look like. But a lot of times what we fill it in with is not necessarily the truth. It's not necessarily fact. So you're probably asking yourself at this point, now that's an assumption. So maybe you're asking, ooh, pretty hawk just landed in my yard. Oh my gosh, I'm such a bird brain. So right now you might be asking yourself, that looks like a juvenile too, y'all. You might be asking yourself, why does this matter? Why does this matter? Well, A, anxiety. If anxiety is something you've experienced, if trying to control things is something you've experienced, this has probably come into play for you more than once. It probably looked a little different than it does for me. But usually the underlying concept is the same. Automatic thoughts are not coming from nowhere. They are deeper beliefs that we have carried for years based on our experiences, based on our assumptions, based on our perspective, on our self-talk. You guys know I love this subject. And based on our core beliefs. So these automatic thoughts that our brain uses to fill in gaps, they don't just materialize out of nowhere. They are based on earlier beliefs, earlier knowledge, earlier perspective, existing stuff. But are they true? Not always. Because my core belief still rears its ugly head. It can look like a number of things, like, I don't know enough. What am I thinking? At the end of the day, I know that's a catchphrase I'm not supposed to use. But at the end of the day, it boils down to one core belief. That is, I'm not enough. I don't even know if it's that I'm not good enough. It's that I'm not enough. I don't have enough. I don't know enough. I'm not doing enough. I'm not enough. So do they need to be questioned? Absolutely, they need to be questioned. And that is what CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, which is my chosen theory at the moment, that is what it's all about. It's about questioning automatic thoughts and reframing them and seeking evidence, experimenting to find that evidence to confirm that the new behavior or the new thoughts are going to work better. Sometimes it's about working on new behaviors until the thought focus changes, which when we talk about self-talk, that's a lot of what we're talking about. A lot of people think of CBT, and I did too, as you got to change your thoughts to change your behavior. Sometimes that works the other way around. Sometimes repetitive behaviors result in a thought change. And that's happened for me a lot. And what I didn't realize is that my whole life, my whole recovery with anxiety and depression has been based on CBT techniques or practices that I have been inadvertently applying to myself and my own life. So seeking evidence, questioning and reframing automatic thoughts, working on new behaviors, or sometimes doing those new behaviors until the thought process changes because we found evidence that they work, finding new knowledge. All of these things are things I talk about on Wellness Wednesday on a regular basis. So what was the end result here? I did know what I was talking about. Those automatic thoughts kicked in and I didn't have a visual, so I had a gap in my brain, and my brain said, you don't know what you're doing. You don't belong here. You're not enough. When in fact, once I actually sat down and started watching some of the videos, I'm like, oh, okay. Because I started filling in the gaps in my brain with fact instead of the fiction that it was reverting to try to protect me from what I didn't know, from what was scary, from what I couldn't control. Watching the counseling videos didn't automatically make me a better counseling student, counselor in training. It filled in the gaps of knowledge with real information. And that meant my brain had less room for scary stories to tell itself. So I'm going to challenge you today to pay attention to the stories that your brain tells you when you don't know something. I would encourage you to ask, is this fact, or is my brain just trying to fill in blank spaces? That is where knowledge becomes power, because when we choose to seek evidence and we're open to seeking evidence that doesn't necessarily confirm our beliefs, that doesn't give in to the confirmation bias, then that's when our thoughts, our stories that we tell ourselves, and even our core beliefs can start to change. So I encourage you, pay attention to the stories your brain tells you when you don't know something. Ask yourself, is this fact or is this my brain trying to fill in blank spaces? And then think about how often does this happen and this is a great journaling technique, also a CBT thing, a mindfulness thing, a wellness thing. There's a great journaling technique. Find that thought, find that story that your brain is telling itself, write it down. Ask is it fact or fiction? Consider how often does it happen when you're lacking knowledge about a process, a person, starting something new, or waiting for an outcome. And then let me know how that works for you. Like I said, if you're not comfortable sharing it publicly in the comments, feel free to send me a message. I'd love to hear if you took part of this challenge and if you identified an automatic thought or a core belief that impacts how you fill in the spaces of what you don't know. So I guess usually I use this section for like a remember this and a remember that. But the reality is I guess I don't really have to know everything after all. What I do need to do is recognize that uncertainty, unknowing, doesn't mean that something's wrong. And my brain sometimes answers the unknown with fear and with maladaptive core beliefs that need some work instead of actual facts. And I wonder if you take my challenge and you start paying attention to what your brain tells you when you have to fill in gaps of knowledge, that you might find the same thing. So while knowledge is power, sometimes there's strength in not knowing, as long as we're open to filling those gaps with information and facts and evidence instead of whatever our past experience tells us. All right. I hope you found this helpful. If you did, please share it. Please consider doing taking me up on my challenge and letting me know how that works for you. And again, this episode will be on YouTube within the next couple of hours. All past episodes are. I'll drop the links to last week's and to the Are You a Fraud and Your Brain is a Liar episodes that I've done on this that are kind of similar. But sometimes we can hear the same thing or learn the same thing over and over and over again, and it takes a slightly different angle or a slightly different situation before it actually clicks. So hopefully you found this helpful. And again, if you did, please share. And until next Wednesday, celebrate the incoming birth of my new niece with me and be well. I'll see you next week.